Well, hey, because you have all this experience and being a young player, and we just talked about with Kobe Mayo as an example. What's the hardest thing for a young player trying to get to the bigs and try to figure themselves out?
Well, the hardest thing is when you get to the big leagues is learn how to hit the curveball.
Yeah.
That was the hardest thing for me. Hell, I didn't really get it. I really never felt comfortable looking for curveballs and or hitting curveballs, and I'd been in the big leagues 7 or 8 years. And I finally learned how to hit one, and that's when I finally felt like I was a pretty good hitter.
Yeah, in those cases, and especially when you're facing big league arms more consistently,
Oh
you
yeah.
might see some of those benders in the minors, but the guys in the bigs, they're bringing it
Oh
each and
yeah.
every day.
It's
So,
a
so
completely different ball game.
hey, so in your mind, you're talking about learn how to throw a curveball or learn how to hit it. How'd you learn? What was the thing that kind of clicked
Well,
in your mind?
this is a long and short story.
I love
I
long and
mean,
short stories,
I
Al.
took, yeah, I'm sure you do. I took some early BP, and I had Billy Hunter, who's a third base coach, throw me curveballs, and I hit a few. Pat Dobson, who was a pitcher for the Orioles, who was with Cleveland at the time, he struck me out all the time. And then they came to town one day, and Earl had me in the lineup, and he said, "B, we're going to have Billy throw you some curveballs because you're going to see some curveballs." So sure enough, he threw me some curveballs, showed me the proper swing how to hit a curveball. And Pat Dobson comes in town that night. First at bat, he throws me a curveball. I hit a home run.
How
So
about that?
yeah, how about that? This game is easy, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so I see Pat Dobson, later that evening after the ball game, and he sort of said a few expletives to me. "Yeah, you hit my curve. You finally hit my curveball." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "You know what happened after that, don't you?" I said, "I never saw another one the rest of the night." So he thought I knew how to hit a curveball, but I was fresh off a session. And but anyway, I never really hit Bert Blyleven. I couldn't hit him to save my life. If he said, "Hey B, I'm gonna throw you a curveball. Here it is, hit it," I couldn't hit it.
Yeah.
He knew I couldn't hit it. Earl knew I couldn't hit it. Everybody knew I couldn't hit. I knew I couldn't hit it. Tell you a quick story. Earl said to me one time, I'm walking up to the on deck circle, and he calls me back. He said, "B, come here, come here." And I thought he was going to pinch hit for me. And I knew I couldn't hit Bert Blyleven. And I was, to say the least, I was glad he's going to pinch hit for me.
Yeah.
So he said to me, "Can you hit that curveball?" And I said, "No." He said, "We'll go up there and look for that fastball." Make good sense. You can't hit the curveball, look for the fastball. I go up there, first pitch curveball, I take a strike one. Next pitch fastball, I swing and miss. It's about a letter high. Next pitch, I stepped it. I said, "Oh Lord, here comes that curveball." Ning, ning. I swing and I miss. He didn't say go up there and look for fastball strike. He said go up there and look for the fastball. I come back to the dugout and he's sitting in the dugout. He has his head down between his legs and he's shaking his head and he's going, he said, I told you to swing at that damn curveball. Oh, it was going to be a strike. I thought I'd get lucky. Well, you haven't been lucky yet. I wanted to say, well, why do you keep putting me in there then? But I was smart enough not to say that.
You were smart. You know, a few of the guys that I know go back and forth quite a bit.
Yeah.
I know Jim Palmer would go back and forth with Earl all the time. But you know what I'm hearing from this conversation, what Earl was trying to tell you?
Yeah.
Mindset. It was mental. You were saying you were going to look for something. You had a game plan.
Yeah.
Now, if you didn't execute the game plan, that's a part of it.
Yeah.
But what I've learned from sorry about that. Yeah. What I've learned, at least from you all, and I like to learn from the ones that have walked the walk. Al, you walked the walk quite a bit. Then you stole quite a bit as well on top of the walk in the walk. But the mental side of the game.
Yeah.
A lot of guys that get to the big leagues, they got the talent. Like I'm looking at this Orioles squad right now, the young guys. And it seems like they're having trouble dealing with the failure, the mental side. What would be your advice in that case with some of these guys that might be pressing, they might be trying to do too much, and might be trying to overcomplicate an already difficult game?
Yeah, I think that's probably true. My approach to the game was, and I got it from your granddad, and his theory was keep it simple, stupid. And that's how I approached the game. I didn't know anything much about hitting. I'd be honest about it. That's why I couldn't hit the curveball. Nobody gave me instructions other than that one session on hitting a curveball. Curveball machine, I never hit off the curveball machine until later in my career. I hit off the machine, and I finally learned that I have to take a different swing to hit a curveball than I took when I was hitting that straight fastball.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time I figured that out, I'd been in the big leagues a lot of years before I figured that out. So I learned that. But at the same time, I think, my approach was, if I'm not doing something very well, I'm going to work at it to get better. And
Mm-hmm.
nothing's going to get in my way. I'm going to work at it to get better. And to my direction to them is, you have to be realistic. If there's something, you have to own up to it. I don't do this very well, so now I'm going to do what it takes to get better. And that's how I approached it. And I think that's how guys should approach it nowadays. Because we all have limitations.
Yeah.
Clint Eastwood said in one of his movies, a man has to know his limitation. So once you recognize and admit to yourself what your limitations are, now what do you do about it?
I saw someone else make a comment about that, Al. There was, Jim Thome, I think Charlie Manuel might have been the one that he got it from, talking about knowing thyself. Know thyself. Know what type of player you are. You, Al, might not be the same as Eddie.
Right.
Jim Thome's a different player than Omar Vizquel was, back in the day playing for Cleveland. But maximize what you can do and realize what you can do. I mean, heck, I got to talk with Mark Teixeira, who's a Maryland guy, played for the Yankees for a while. But Mark was talking about as a switch hitter. He goes, I couldn't hit an inside fastball as a right-handed hitter. So I told myself I'm looking for a breaking ball because I couldn't. I already acknowledged what I couldn't do, but I'm going to focus on what I can do.
Yep.
Right? Does that make that's not crazy, right?
No, it doesn't sound crazy. I mean, because I think, listen, you have to recognize, like you said, recognize yourself, what your pluses are and what your liabilities are. I couldn't hit the curveball, so I tried to lay off the curveballs until I learned how to hit it. I couldn't hit the fastball middle in, so my approach was, I'd inside out that fastball when I moved off the plate. So if the ball were in, I'd try to take it for a ball. But if the pitcher threw the ball middle of the plate away, I know I can hit that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I narrowed down the strike zone for myself. And I learned to really, do the things that I did fairly well good and still worked on the negative things. But yes.